Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed representatives of the United Nations, Mayor Mustwise, where is he? There he is. Representatives of the Korean Consulate and Embassy, clean techies from around the world, members of Parliament, standing there, Representative Dr. Klaus Wiener, and everybody else. I cannot cite all the names, but I can only stress that on behalf of the co-organizers, on behalf of Future Cleantech Architects, the City of Remscheid, we couldn't be more pleased to welcome all of you to the ARC 2023. It's great having you. You've come a long way. We want to make this stay in Remscheid worthwhile in 2023 again. So, a warm welcome here. I am joined, my name is Peter Schniering, I'm the founder of Future Cleantech Architects. We're a climate innovation think tank working on hard-to-abate sectors, as you might have seen looking at the agenda and the chapters we've prepared today. I'm very pleased to be joined by two of the three co-organizing organizations. The third you will hear live, not live, pre-recorded from the UN negotiations in Bonn that are preparing COP28 right now. But, you know, the thing that the climate challenge and the development challenge has in common with our festival is we have no time. We need to rush through this. We need to be on time because we have a lot of sessions. We have like 30 formats, plus 50 speakers, and more than 25 countries in Remscheid. So without further ado, I'd like to give the word to one of the first of our co-hosts with this UNIDO ITPO Germany. They've supported us very early on, from the early days, even before we were founded, same as EIT Energy. And so we're joined by Vanessa Völkel from UNIDO ITPO Germany. Please say something about the organization. Why have you decided to team up with us again for the ARC 2023? And what are your expectations, Vanessa?
Well, does it work? Yeah. So we're not here for the first time, as Peter said. We were here in 2021 when UNIDO and FCA were teaming up for the Global Core Competition, an international competition on clean tech innovation and sustainable land management. That was a very successful project. Actually, we both were here in the theater with 200 people on the stage moderating the award ceremony. And this was so successful that people were asking, like, why are you not doing something again in Remscheid? And this is like how the ARC 2022 was born, also with the great support of the city of Remscheid. Without this, it couldn't be possible. So thank you once again also to the mayor of Remscheid, first of all, and to the city of Remscheid. UNIDO, some words about UNIDO. It's the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. It's a specialized agency which has the mandate to promote a sustainable industrial development. And it's clear, like when we speak about industry, about innovation, about infrastructure, that's the sustainable development goal number 9, what we promote and why we are here. We, that is UNIDO ITPO Germany, we are based in Bonn at the UN campus. Our team here and also UNIDO colleagues from headquarters. We have Mr. Sanja Shrestha here from UNIDO headquarters in Vienna, whom I would like to welcome. And we have also a UNIDO colleague from Egypt here, so feel free to reach out to the different UNIDO colleagues here on stage. And we didn't come alone. We brought an international delegation, Peter.
Tell us something about them.
Yeah. So we have, for instance, the biggest carpet manufacturer here, 15% of the worldwide share. And this is relevant because we are having a delegation which is here to inform themselves about process heat, to decarbonize the process heat which is needed in industry. And why is this important? Like in Germany alone, 67% of the heat, of the energy consumption in the industry sector is needed for process heat. And of the total energy consumption in Germany, 20% is needed for process heat. So this is why it is important to decarbonize this sector, to use renewable energies. So the delegation is here from Egypt. From India, we have a representative. From the concentrated solar sector and solar steam, we have representatives from Tunisia, so in total 6 people, and we will see them on stage also in our next panel at 11 o'clock.
Maybe you can add 2 or 3 words on the panel, because there's the co-hosts and also other organizations, Clean Air Task Force from the US, much appreciated, co-organizing specialized, dedicated events, such as on aviation, or in your case, on industrial heat, so things that are so hard to decarbonize. Delegation just arriving, having visited Dirostal, the massive forging company, this morning, to see how hard the process actually is. Roman Diedrichs in the back of the hall. Welcome. Back to the panel. So what's in your special forum, in your special panel you'll be hosting?
Okay, so at 11:15 here in the theater, we will have a panel on decarbonizing industrial heat with representatives from the international delegation and also from the concentrated solar sector. It will be moderated by my colleague Michael, and so please stay tuned for this session. It comes directly after the next session, which we are moderating. Peter.
Correct, and that will be abstractly on innovation. But let's hear from Fabian Zacharowicz from EIT Energy, which is not, to the layman, not a name as well known as UN climate change, obviously, but it's one of the most important actors in Europe to drive Cleantech. Please tell us something about it, and what are your expectations? Why do you come again? It was so hot here last time, and it's getting hot again.
Yeah, basically, energy, we see ourselves as an innovation engine in Europe for climate tech. So we are an investor, we invest in climate tech, we like CapEx-heavy innovation. We don't have nothing against CapEx low innovation, but CapEx heavy, early stage, and this does not mean small. We are doing small investments, but we are also doing large industrial projects at an early stage. We have a green fertilizer project running, green steel project running. We were amongst the first investors in H2 Green Steel and are heavily working just in what you mentioned here, right? And yeah, for us it's super important to have the interaction with policymakers, with this very, very, very interesting mixture here from policymakers, investors, corporate members, and so on. And this is what the ARC for us makes so interesting, to listen a bit what are the discussion in the governmental, in the corporate world, and then translate it to real action, to real company fundings in the industry.
Thank you so much. And with that, I already have to look at my own watch, because I sort of ask everybody to stay on time, and I'm the first to break this rule right away. But we should listen to a 2-minute message from Bonn, from the UN negotiations, by Carlos, who's also joined the press conference. And it turned out they are so busy in the negotiations, we will loop them in several times, so you will hear every now and again a statement from Bonn. Also on a new Cleantech survey we're hosting with UN Climate Change together, where I would kindly ask you to take part. But maybe Simon, who's so kind to run the technology here. There's 2 managers of the stages, by the way. Simon and Hannes, you'll meet them everywhere. Yeah. Try to play the movie.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you very much to the organizers for this kind invitation to contribute to this important event. First of all, I would like to also thank to the Mayor of Ramscheid for hosting such an important event, including, of course, these sessions at the ARC Festival. And this is thanks to the collaboration with Future Clean Architects, but also a big range of partners, including collaborators such as UNIDO, our colleagues at the Tech and CTCM, but also a different branch of partners that work closely with the Global Innovation Hub. So I'd like to thank you for these tireless efforts as we move towards making every year the ARC Festival a success. On behalf of our Executive Secretary, Simon Steele, I'd like to highlight his messaging at COP27 in Egypt, Sharm el-Sheikh last November, indicating that Paris gave us the agreement, Katowice and Glasgow gave us the plan, and Sharm el-Sheikh shifted us towards implementation. No one can be mere passenger on this journey, and this is a clear signal that times have changed and that our policies, business, infrastructure, and actions, whether personal or public, must be aligned with the Paris Agreement and with the Convention. This IPCC community of scientists also told us that it's important and mandatory to cut emissions by nearly half by 2030, which is only 7 years away. which has given us the reassurance that there is no room for backsliding, and that the phase down of all fossil fuels is happening. That's why the ARC Festival, looking to means to decarbonize hard-to-abate industries, is so important. Thank you again for this opportunity to speak virtually with you today, and I look forward, of course, to the outcomes of this busy week that you will have at the ARC Festival, and I wish you much success, and we in the Global Innovation Hub are at your disposal. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so
Because I think what is special about the ARC is we all know about the problems, and there are many conferences where we talk about the problems and the challenges, and after 2 days you think like, I know this and it is a huge problem. But what I noticed last year at the ARC, and I hope it will be the same here, we talk about solutions, and I really hope that you will go with new contacts, new ideas, and that we will also have some solutions at least for the challenges which we all know about.
now, without further ado, we're just 3 minutes late. I would kindly maybe give you a quick overview before we ask the stage on, maybe you can stay with us for a second, Fabian. Give you a quick overview of why innovation matters. We've discussed, people discuss innovation, you hear innovation everywhere, but there's actually methods to measure what kind of innovation works in a Cleantech context or in other contexts, how it's going to be structured, how it could be structured. And for this, I would kindly ask ask this overview to be opened on an analysis that has repeatedly been done by ITIF, which is a US foundation, on the structural competitiveness, the ability of countries to innovate, in this specific case, to innovate on Cleantech. And without going into too much detail on this now, we'd just like to show you that it's a very holistic, comprehensive setup that's necessary to drive innovation. The policymakers in the room will know this. Those working in Brussels and elsewhere also know it's not just about funding. Funding is an important part, but in order to fund, you need to know what to fund. In order for technologies to be scaled from very early stages to the mass market, you need to know what the innovators need. And we have many innovators in the room, and we'd love them to exchange with the policymakers and with those who provide the funding, the finance, on what it takes to scale these things until they can really have a measurable, a significant climate effect, until they can reduce emissions significantly. It's nice if we develop things in laboratories, but it's a completely different story of finally seeing massive gigawatt or terawatt hour emission reductions in real life. And so I'm citing from this study by, these are the panel members, we'll introduce them in a minute, but I'm citing from the study from ITIF, and there's some top performers, they're clustering this, we won't go into details, and they're measuring all kinds of indicators of how sustainably, in this case, clean technologies are being scaled. And if you could, sorry, I also have a pointer, sorry, Simona. So, just real brief, because we'll touch upon it in the discussion later. There's all kinds of aspects to driving innovation. So the knowledge needs to be developed, and there needs to be a diffusion system in place. Second one, there needs to be sufficient room for entrepreneurial, so startup, scale-up, experimentation, and creating this market. And lastly, that's how they structure is, you need, this is very important, and the policymakers will certainly confirm this, you need social you need to legitimize it socially, and you need collaboration. This is especially true for Cleantech, especially capital-intensive, long innovation stages Cleantech, where it takes years and years and years. It's the opposite of software. It's the opposite of a lot of other industries where you can get things to market in few years. Sometimes it takes a decade and it takes longer. So you need acceptance and you need collaboration. This is also, that was one of the first reasons why we teamed up together, right? Because UNIDO, for example, does a lot of technological transfer to other countries, which is so important for that. All right, sorry, that was a small lecture. That was not even my intellectual property. It was just citing from somebody else. Let us ask the stage on guests, and let us, Fabian, we'll talk to you later. We'll see you on various panels and various roundtables. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
And with this, let's see whom we invite for this first discussion.
For the first discussion, we would like to ask our speakers on stage. So Johanna Schiele, please come on stage. And in the middle, please. Yeah. So Dr. Klaus Wiener, I would like to ask on stage. And Mr. Tore Lohmann, please, on stage. Great, take your seats, thank you. So we have 3 brilliant speakers today, and I would like to shortly introduce these speakers to you before we start into the panel discussion. So we have Johanna Schiele here on stage. Johanna Schiele joined the European Commission in 2022 and is working as a policy officer at the EU Innovation Fund. The Innovation Fund is one of the world's largest funding programs for the demonstration of innovative low-carbon technologies, and it will provide 38 billion euro of support from 2020 to 2030. Her work focuses on EU-wide cleantech financing and covers instruments such as the Contracts for Differences and the EU Hydrogen Bank. Prior to joining the Commission, Johanna Schiele worked as a researcher in the energy sector. Welcome to stage, Johanna. Dr. Klaus Wiener is a member of the German Bundestag for the electoral district of Mettmann I since 2021. In the Bundestag, Dr. Klaus Wiener is a full member of the Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety and Consumer Protection Committee and a deputy member of the Finance and Economic Affairs Committee. Prior to that, he worked for 23 years as a chief economist for various insurance companies and insurance industry associations. Welcome to our session, Klaus. And Tore Lohmann is the head of the Fertilizer and Methanol Operating Unit in Dortmund since 2021. You work for ThyssenKrupp Uhde, which supplies the technology to build plants for the production of green ammonia, which is needed for industry decarbonization. Mr. Lohmann has worked at ThyssenKrupp Uhde in various positions for almost 25 years and also gained international experiences when heading the foreign subsidiary in Cairo. Welcome to the discussion, Tore. So Peter, do you still want to give further introductory words to the session, or can we start with the questions?
I think we should start.
Okay, good. So my first question goes to Johanna. Since you, Johanna, you're working as a policy officer at the EU Innovation Fund, so it's very clear that this question will go to you, the first one. So how can we drive innovation harder in the EU?
Thanks very much. Thanks a lot for the invite as well. It's great to be here. It's the first time I'm at the ARC Cleantech Festival, so I'm very excited for the next 2 days and also to engage, especially with companies who might apply to our fund or who maybe have already applied. So the EU Innovation Fund is one of the world's largest funds for cleantech development and deployment. We were founded in 2020. And the idea is really to create a financing instrument on the EU level that fills a real gap in the financing market for clean technologies. So what do I mean with that? Clean tech is very CapEx heavy, but at the same time, many of the technologies that we know now that we need in 2040, 2050, they're still very technologically risky. They have maybe been demonstrated in the lab, but they've not been rolled out on a commercial scale. And that's exactly the stage where we're at right now for many technologies, especially in industry decarbonization, that we need to bring these things in steel, in cement, in chemicals, from the lab, from the demonstration stage, to proper commercial scale where they can produce 2 million tons of steel per year, or the output levels that we see with industrial production. And these type of investments, they're very large ticket sizes. And in terms of the volume, usually it would be institutions like pension funds, for example, that would have the volume to invest in these projects, but they are way too risky in terms of the risk profile for an investor like a pension fund. So how we see ourselves is we're an instrument with the volume of a pension fund, but the risk appetite of a venture fund. And that's really the gap we try to fill with the Innovation Fund. It's a new instrument. It's funded from the European emissions trading system. So we don't use tax money. We recycle revenues from the highest polluters to give it to the best performers and deep decarbonization projects in Europe. And what I think we need to do on the EU level, we need to think more European. We need to fund the best projects wherever they are in Europe, rather than every country deciding to fund everything on its member state territory. We need to use money as effectively as possible so that all of these euros go the longest way possible. And lastly, we need to find a good balance between protecting IP and protecting the commercial interests of the companies that we found, but at the same time doing knowledge dissemination and knowledge sharing so that other second of a kind, third of a kind projects can follow and learn from these investments.
Thank you, Johanna. And I have to say, the team is sort of distilling key takeaways from each session. And what you just said can go straight into the key takeaways. So these points, thank you very much for sharing them. Now, if I may ask a follow-up on that, and then also hand over to Klaus from there on. You've sort of sketched the combination of the volume of the fund and the risk appetite of a different industry, the venture scene, so to say. Still, what would make your life even easier? So, I mean, the fund is well equipped. I think it's 38 billion until 2030. What would it say, I mean, the question usually comes in the end. You meet a fairy, you have 3 wishes, okay? But we'll take one of the fairy wishes now, which is, if you were to drive it even harder, what would make your life easier?
I know this is a bad answer, but I'm going to say more money.
Even more money, yeah.
Yeah, so we have the US IRA, which is 360 billion euros. The amount of that goes to similar projects like we fund is roughly 180 billion euros. So there you see we have 40 billion in the US, it's 180 billion for the same sets of technologies. And the reason why this doesn't work is because we don't have fiscal policy on the EU level, so we can't work with tax credits. And I think this discussion was politically had during the ETS negotiations before Christmas. There was a trilogue, the negotiations between the Parliament, the Council, and the Commission proposed to increase this European instrument to 80 billion euros, which especially in the area of hydrogen and long-duration storage would have enabled us to be a proper counterpart to the IRA. But that proposal was declined in the Council because some member states, especially the more wealthy member states, choose to do funding on a national level, which is perfectly understandable from a national perspective. But in terms of facing a challenge like the US IRA, I think there's a bit of a mismatch on how fragmented the European funding landscape is.
Thank you so much. And there couldn't be a better bridge we could build to Klaus, because we happen to have a member of a member state parliament on stage. So looking at this debate and what Johanna just sketched, from a German perspective, from a German lawmaker's perspective, what's your view on this? What do you see? Do you agree with we should think more European, there shouldn't be as many national activities? And again, the question, what would make your life easier, scaling Cleantech quicker?
Well, thank you very much. And first of all, of course, thank you for having me, because I think that having an event like this is desperately needed. We have huge challenges, and I think the only way to go about this is, instead of working with bans and prohibitions and regulations, is to really come up with innovation. That's the key when we look at the problems that we have from a global scale. What would make my life easier at the national level? I think first we have to acknowledge, when it comes to money and collecting money also from institutional investors, we talk a lot about regulation from the European level. And so I think what is needed here is a regulation which, on the one hand, acknowledges that we need safety in financial markets, but at the same time a regulation which is really risk-based, but at the same time leaves leeway for institutional investors which have a lot of money, more than the 40 billion that you sketched. I mean, we talk about billions here that could be put to work if the regulation is done in a way that capital not only flows into government bonds, but more capital flows into venture capital funds and the like. So I think part of the money that we do not mobilize at this point in time is due to the fact that regulation is in the way of doing this.
Yeah, Klaus, you mentioned regulation, so it also comes to my mind when we have the industry perspective on that. Maybe from your perspective, Tore, how can policymakers, from your perspective, create a stable environment for companies working on clean tech innovation? So what do you need from the policy maker space to accelerate, to roll out more effectively?
Yeah, thank you very much also. From my side, it's very interesting, and thank you also, Peter, for the opening. And the opening already touched a lot of points from the industry perspective. So we are coming from ThyssenKrupp Uhde. ThyssenKrupp Uhde is not dealing with steel. Usually everybody thinks ThyssenKrupp is steel, but we are dealing with technologies, with chemical plants, building chemical plants and providing technologies for that. And exactly, we are dealing always in our projects with risk management, and risks is the most important thing for us. And that means on the other side, we need to get a plan ready, and plan also means, and you touched it in the opening, a long-term plan. And long-term means for us, development for technologies last 10, 20 years, from the laboratory scale up to the real industrial scale, where we talk about 1,000 tons of production of a certain chemical. And for such an horizon of 20 years, we need, of course, a predictability of where things are going to, and that not just on a national or European, even on an international level. So if you see, we are having roughly 90% of our sales abroad, so not in Germany. And even if we look on Europe, there we have maybe just 20% of our sales. So we are really going in the world. We are having a lot of projects in the US currently, inspired by the IRA. Our clients are getting a lot of profits from that side, and we're gaining from that. On the other side, we are developing in Germany the technologies. Here's our technology center, and they are especially the step from the laboratory scale to the demo plant, so the demonstration plants. That is a very capital-intensive step, what we are taking then on our own. And there, the biggest problem we are facing is that the application time is very long for such funds. And secondly, usually they are only funding the CapEx. And especially for these demonstration plants, the OpEx is also a problem, because we are producing in a scale that the product cannot be thrown away, but it needs to be subsidized in a certain time-limited way, not forever, but on a certain duration.
Sorry, and I already see Johanna grabbing the mic for good reasons, since you certainly want to comment upon that. I'd like to sort of take up also touch upon the previous question and your remark, because I think we can bind it all very nicely together here. Having the three of you on stage, and you were all mentioning, with all the progress that's been made, the shortcomings that are still there in terms of risk, in terms of the long-term character of things, and in terms of the available funding. So, Johanna, please go ahead with your comment. But if you, to all three, please consider in the back of your mind, if you could sketch this system together, like the national level, the European level, and the corporate side. If you could draw the perfect system, say you had tabula rasa, nothing on the table, what would it look like then?
If I may, I don't think that we have to reinvent the system. I think that here in Europe, and in Germany in particular, we have developed centuries ago, decades ago, the social market economy. And I think this is a tool which has worked quite well over the last 70 years. I think we need to adopt the system to the new frameworks that we have, to the new environment that we are in, but I don't think that we have to reinvent the system. I think when it comes to giving incentives to invest, it's all about risk return. Yeah? How do we mobilize capital, private capital? It's, of course, the investors who look at what can I earn with this kind of investment and what risk do I see. Of course, there is a role then for governments in order to reduce perhaps sometimes the risk of certain projects by taking first loss tranches and the like. But I think lo and behold, we have to create an environment in which the tools that we had for so many years are still at work. And if I may add in that respect, I'm a bit concerned I am about at this point in time is that we are running in the opposite direction. Look at China, for instance. What do? Instead of having the market working heavily, they put money where they believe the right inventions are and innovations are. And I think that's the wrong approach. I think we need to, again, strengthen the market tools that we have. And with this, I'm pretty sure that we will have the forces of the market coming to play, and then we get the innovations that we need. At the company level, there's so much ingenuity. I think that's the way to go.
My comment was, of course, not referring to overthrow the system as such, but sort of detail out what Johanna pointed to. I mean, you're working on carbon contracts for difference, on the hydrogen bank and so forth. So we have this challenge, which we mentioned in the opening, and Vanessa, you touched upon it. This is long development times, capital heavy, at Cleantech that doesn't have a market in the first couple of years. So that's what I was pointing to, and I thought, how can we improve this system? So to all of you, the question maybe.
Yeah, personally, I think this is not news, but I think what we really don't do very well in Europe is this early commercialization stage of things coming out of universities, out of research labs. I think the US is way better at doing that. Before going to Brussels, I spent 2 years in Boston, and the MIT or the Harvard incubator, for example, they spin out companies like crazy. And that's really, this early stage is something where we do too little, both in terms of equity investment, public equity investments, and getting startups and scale-ups out of universities quicker. But then on the other hand, I think, especially maybe in Germany, we have a lot of large-scale, long-term industrial subsidies that are maybe not necessarily sustainable because they go against the competitive advantages that companies have or don't have, and they eat a lot of budget, but they also might not lead to long-term competitiveness. So I think my plea would be to only take those risks out of projects that the private sector doesn't take on. So how do I make this more concrete? What I mean with that is, for example, construction risk or project development risk. Hydrogen is an economy that we want to move to scale. These are not first of a kind, second of a kind projects. We want to build gigawatts of electrolyzers. So that's something where we shouldn't fund the capex. We shouldn't give any money during construction, because project development construction risks is something that the private sector can handle best. What we should do is we should only pay based on verified and certified volumes that are actually produced, and try to get a market going at the beginning, for example, through contracts for difference or fixed premium auction, but then also have a clear end date for that money. So if we don't see the technology costs coming down, if our bet doesn't work, that if we throw a lot of money at it, it's going to get cheaper in the future, we have to have an exit plan. We have to know when we stop throwing money at something that doesn't become cheaper and that doesn't become commercial on time.
And if I may add, we also need deeper capital markets. Yeah, I think that's a big advantage the US has. Yeah, when it comes to old age savings, for instance, we have the pay-as-you-go system. In the US, there is the 401k plans and the like. And I think the deeper the capital markets, the more money you also have for venture capital. And I think that's the way to go, yeah, because private money is desperately needed. The amounts that we need to get this right are so huge. The public sector is desperately short of money to fund this at a scale that we need.
Yeah, usually I can only say I fully agree. So, Johanna, you make it perfectly on the point. The problem is not the long-term subsidies, and that we are not looking for from the industry perspective. And we are used to manage project risks, construction risks, as you said, and we are building also projects at a large scale, ammonia and also hydrogen. But especially, as I said, this first step, this demo plants, where we're coming from the university or from our laboratories into a first commercial, semi-commercial operation. And as even the name said, semi-commercial, it cannot be a commercial plant, and therefore the products out of that plant has not a competitive advantage from the cost side. And then for a short duration, in order to get the competitiveness, these funds are necessary, and that is quite important. So therefore fully agree on that point.
Yeah, another question, when we look into the future, like maybe to all of you, what do you think are the major breaking points for cleantech innovation in the upcoming years?
Yeah, maybe I take that point. Exactly that we're coming fast into large-scale operations. So we see currently a lot of small-scale hydrogen projects, for example, in Germany. They are all in the megawatt scale. That sounds big, but it's small at the end of the day, and we need also to think about bridging technology. So, and therefore the debate is all around the color codes currently of green, blue, and whatever, hydrogen and ammonia, and that we're getting there a little bit more freedom in the direction of even there short term. So for a certain duration, we should be more relaxed on the color code to get the things running, and having then on a longer term the clear regulation step down CO2 removal quota, for example, starting with 75% and ending then in a certain year with 0. And then everybody has a plan and can follow that. And this predictability is quite important also for the foreign investors. So our clients are sitting abroad, like in Egypt, South Korea, and if they know Germany, Europe is a market and we need to go in this market systems, then they can plan and they are investing then also, and that is what we are looking for. So Europe can profit a lot also from the IRA if we're using now the capacities building up there for blue ammonia, for example, shipping it to Germany, and we can accelerate with that money also our hydrogen economy in Europe.
Anyone else who would like to respond on the question?
Well, I
the
think
major breaking points.
Well, I think that something that we've alluded to already is indeed regulation. Yeah, I think we are here in Remscheid, the town of Konrad Röntgen, who has worked with X-rays at a time when it was feasible. I'm not so sure what you would encounter today. Yeah? So I think that we need regulation which is sensible, not too much, of course. Safety is an issue, but what I sense is basically since 2008 we have a regulatory tsunami, which is not only in the financial industry, but we have it everywhere. Yeah? And I think that is something which is standing in the way of us becoming more innovative and having more innovation, apart from the other issues that you mentioned, the scaling up and the like and the funding. But I think that regulation is key. We talked about regulatory sandboxes, which can help companies when they are at the early stage. Perhaps this is a way to go about and to do more in this respect, but that, in my mind, this is a major breaking point.
Very quick answer for me, it's really supply of cheap electricity, because what does clean tech mean? All of these clean technologies, they're either, they have a sectoral coupling element, they all use electricity, clean electricity in some application somewhere further downstream. And in Europe, we have the advantage that we have the ETS, so there is predictability, there's a carbon price that creates a business case for many things. But at the same time, at the moment, we have energy prices that are just way higher than everywhere else. And that's a structural imbalance against which we can't subsidize uphill, and we shouldn't aim to. So here, really basics of supply and demand. We need much more supply of clean power, and we need much more innovation that brings demand down where things can be substituted, or that uses power more efficiently where that's possible. Because at the moment, I think both gas and electricity prices are just too high for Europe to be competitive in many of these fields. So building renewables, using the nuclear that we have, really clean power is at the basis of all of this, all of these clean tech developments.
Thank you, all three. And this brings us back to something Tore just mentioned, which is the scaling. I mean, we have the early stage things we still need to develop. We have the sectors that are hard to electrify, but in particular, as Johanna pointed out, we need a whole lot of green electricity, and we need it fast. And in this context, I would like to do a little mid-session, or almost end-session commercial here for you, to engage actively. And for one particular session, you spoke about electrolyzers, and that electrolyzers need to be scaled now. We happen to have Christopher Frey from Sunfire. I don't know if he's here already, but he'll be part of an excellent panel of how specific and hands-on we would like this festival to be later in the innovation chapter. Last year, there was SAP, people from SAP met with GIZ, German government agency, and Leon from SAP is here later in the innovation chapter today presenting how this turned into a project in Brazil to track the origins of green hydrogen. And at the same time, Christopher Frey will explain how they are massively driving up the production capacities of electrolyzers, including taking over a location close by, Remscheid, Solingen, which is for a specific sub-application. But so in other words, please use this opportunity, if you connect later in the coffee breaks and everywhere, to ask these specific questions, to talk to the people who actually scale the technology and the people who develop the technology in earlier stages, and then bring, so that this connection is being made to the people who sort of work in Berlin, work in Brussels, work in the large corporates. So these are being brought together.
Yeah, I think we're so well on time that I even would say let's open also the floor for questions from the audience, because it's an excellent opportunity to have such speakers here. So if there are any questions from the audience before we close the session, also feel free to ask your questions to our panelists. Do we have a microphone for the audience?
One.
Otherwise, we can just go and open the floor.
So there's two questions there. I'll just forward. Please briefly state your name and affiliation, the organization you're with, and then ask a, if possible, short question.
My question is to Johanna. I'm Deepak Gadia from India, but chairman of Sunrise CSP, which is also headquartered in Cyprus. The challenge we face as a startup is that there is no money available for startup for small funding. Every time we go for funding, they say don't come for anything less than 5 million, otherwise the due diligence is very expensive. So how do we start without funding?
Excellent question. I think there are instruments out there for small funding amounts as well. I'm only familiar with the European funding instrument, so I think in the specific member states that would look different, so there I'm really not an expert. But in the Innovation Fund we have a program called Small Scale Calls, so that's for CapEx up to 7.5 million euros, so that's a smaller range. Then there's also EIC and EIT, so there's little, where they take equity stakes in startups. So that's what I'm familiar with on the EU level. I think EIB is also doing smaller loans, but there the DD process is quite long and heavy, so maybe not exactly perfect for a startup.
Okay.
Yeah, hello, my name is Barbara from the German Federal Agency for Disruptive Innovation. So 2 very short questions, one to all the panelists and then the second one to Johanna. The first one would be, so if I'm not entirely mistaken, the current carbon price at the EU level is about $100 per ton. Too high? Too low? When is the right time to increase it in order to get even more oomph behind the transition to a clean tech economy? And then the second question would be to Johanna about the fund specifically. So what does the ideal company profile that applies to your fund look like? Just to put yourself into the shoes of an applicant, what would you like to see?
Well, perhaps on the first question about the right price, I think the dilemma is that nobody really knows. And that's why I'm so much in favor of this emission trading system, where we say, well, the certain amount of carbon dioxide we want to reduce, but below that, the price establishes itself on the basis of supply and demand. There may be some companies which can easily switch their business models into less carbon intensive work. Others may have a more difficult time. And so underneath this ceiling that we have for the total amount of carbon emissions, the price establishes itself. And whether that's then 100 euros or 50 euros or 200 euros, the market will show.
Currently, the 100 euro of the carbon price is exactly the number where a lot of projects are getting feasible. So therefore, from the market perspective, I would say it's now kicking into a real price. The problem we are facing currently is only that parallelly to the CO2 price, we have also a freaking high energy price in Europe. And even that energy price is currently accelerating innovations, but to that level that in Europe it will even stop them. So therefore what we see is that the innovation to production, it's coming abroad, and we are looking into a kind of deindustrialization of Germany and Europe, and that is currently what we need to avoid. So therefore, the combination out of extremely high energy prices in gas, but also in electricity, plus the CO2 is of course currently a killer for many innovations, and that is a big problem. So therefore, a certain link between the two things is also necessary somehow.
Yeah, I can fully underwrite that. I mean, I work for DG Klima. We're running the ETS, as in the carbon pricing system. It is a market, so the market determines the price. And I think DG Klima, which is maybe different to national environmental and climate ministries, on this front, we've really been proposing market-based instruments and using the ETS for as much as possible, and doing as little double regulation through other instruments as possible. That said, I think there's some investments in very long-lived assets that are not triggered by the carbon price yet, but the investment cycles are coming up now. So for example, steel plants, they live for 60, 70 years. If there's a reinvestment cycle now and the carbon price today doesn't trigger that investment yet, maybe we need to help these companies to make the decision now, because otherwise we have a stranded asset in 30 years. So I think if you can clearly identify an additional market failure, there's reason to intervene above the ETS. If you can't clearly make that case, maybe you shouldn't. Yeah, and then on the second point, on the perfect profile, I don't think there's a perfect application to us. We have a range of different programs. We have a loan program together with Breakthrough Energy, where we top up investments from Breakthrough, so that's loans. We do loans with the EIB through InvestEU. We have the large-scale call, which is probably the most well-known investment program of the Innovation Fund. This is really ticket sizes from 50 to 200 plus million for large industrial installations. I think across the bench, what we're looking for is projects that can really substantiate very well how they're going to get to what they promise us. So we get a lot of applications that say we're going to avoid this many million tons, but the life cycle methodology for assessing the carbon abatement is just totally off. Or projects that say we can reach entry into operation within 1.5 years, and that would be fantastic, and we would love that. But if the project can't show that this is actually realistically happening, then we'd rather get a more realistic application that says maybe we need 3 years to financial close, but then this is actually a solid case and we can get there. We're not going to drop out of the program in 2 years' time and we have parked that money for nothing for 3 years, because that also has an opportunity cost for other projects that we could fund in the meantime.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the questions. Further questions from the audience? There's 2 more, please. Oh, 3 more. Okay, we'll take them together. Please briefly state your name, affiliation, and the question then.
Okay. Hello, my name is Maria from Breakthrough Energy. I'm wondering, I'm sure you are familiar with the German Carbon Contracts for Difference program that has just been approved by the Finance Ministry. So I'm wondering what your views are on that program and whether this will help with the challenges you were just talking about, and whether this will also help like innovators and scale-ups. And then how a European Carbon Contract for Difference program can supplement the German program, or the other way around.
Thank you, Maria. This is a complex one. Let's answer this straight and then come to the others.
Well, yeah, I think that this is a good way to go about the problem, that unfortunately we do not have the same speed globally when it comes to reducing carbon emissions. And so I think that this is a good program, a good way to proceed. Of course, it's only second best. Better would, of course, be if we were to see progress in that area globally. But at the same time, we also need to protect the industry that we have here. So yeah, that's a good program in my mind.
Further, yeah, Johanna, you need to answer this.
Yeah, maybe very briefly. I mean, Carbon Contracts for Difference, the idea is based on an auction. And an auction only works if there's competition. And I think Germany is a borderline case, because there's quite a lot of industrial actors, but even in Germany, which has a lot of industry, it's unclear whether there can actually be competition between the 4 primary steel facilities that we have, or the 3 chemicals facilities that do this exact type of process that would fall in one auctioning basket. So I would always say, if you have to negotiate in the end, but you call it an auction, that's not great. Then be upfront and say we're negotiating with these large industrials. But to pretend that it's a market-based instrument when actually, realistically, there won't be a competitive auction, I think that's difficult, because seeing it from the bureaucrat side, bureaucrats will never be able to know the cost structure, the project financials, the delivery contracts of a company in the amount of detail that would be necessary to judge whether the amount of money that they're asking for is actually what they need or it's more. So yeah, I think packaging is important. It's important not to package something as something that it's not. Yeah, that would be.
Thank you. Let's take the remaining questions. Richard?
Yeah. Hello, my name is Rishikesh and I'm a master thesis student. And my question is, how might escalating geopolitical tension, increasing inflation rates and potential economic recession impact the attainment of targets and implementation of policies aimed at fostering the development of hydrogen economy?
Of the hydrogen economy,
yeah.
That was the last part, okay? Let's take one more. It's a complex one as well.
I think it was not clear, right?
Not clear. Sorry, could you repeat the question one more time? It was not well understood here, maybe.
How might escalating geopolitical tension, increase in inflation rates, and potential economic recession impact the attainment of targets and implementation of policies aimed at fostering the development of hydrogen economy?
We could do our own session on that, but yeah. It's complex again. Sorry, real quick answer, and then the last question. Klaus and Tore.
Well, of course, all this, what you mentioned, the geopolitical tensions, that Zeitenwende, as we call it here in Germany, makes things more difficult. Yeah? Starting with corporations globally, but at the same time, money. We spend so much money on issues which we thought we don't have to spend again, like defense and the like. So, of course, that makes life much more difficult. We can only spend every euro once, and the Zeitenwende, the geopolitical tensions, are a big hindrance in that respect.
Tensions on one side, other side is solutions, and you mentioned that also. For sure, the change from hydrocarbon to a hydrogen-based economy will have changes in the geopolitical landscape, and that is for some countries a change or a chance, and for some countries, of course, a challenge currently. And I think that is important to see how the geopolitical scene might change then in future, and I think that is also maybe another panel discussion then, what is quite interesting to see how much also the influence from that side is coming.
We have a lack of microphones, a shortage of microphones. So one more, and then a quick session wrap up. Yeah. Enrico.
Hello, my name is Enrico Regano, and I'm a student. My question is really simple. Are you optimistic about Europe's state as a place of opportunity for young people like me who maybe want to go into the tech sector and start a startup in the near future? And do you think we can catch up with the United States, or do you believe that like in 5 to 10 years still the US will be a better place to do that?
Thank you so much. And so now listen to this real quick pitch for Europe and Germany and other European countries.
The short answer, yes. Long answer, as I said already. So we in Germany and also in Europe, with our technologies, with our solution-oriented, I think we are still a good place, and we can provide innovations for the world, and the world is asking for this innovation. So therefore, I would say, yes, stay in Europe, but gain also experience abroad.
Well, I would agree, and I would also add that we desperately need more young people going into the realm that we discussed today. We know that the young people tend to be more innovative compared to the older ones. I have to admit that, unfortunately, given my age, but that's the way we need to go. I would really like to see more young people going into areas like engineering, like natural science, like mathematics, to get things going. I think that's where we need the capacity, and in that respect, I think there's a bright future for young people who do this in Europe.
I want to make a very short pitch also for policy entrepreneurship. I think there's a lot of highly educated people who think there's no place for them in a public administration. It's slow, it's bureaucratic, it's got all the things you don't want from a dynamic job. I think that can be true, but I also think there's a lot of space for people who want to have impact and who want to have leverage to forge a way in a public administration and be innovative within something like a ministry. And I think we need more people there as well, because we can't be as slow and as bureaucratic as we've been in the past. And I actually think the EU is a great example of where this works reasonably well. I don't want to say compared to national administrations, but I think, yeah, no.
Don't get me started here.
So yeah, also the case for financial and business model innovation also from within the administration, yeah.
Nice
Vanessa,
pitch.
You go next. We have the final round, right?
That would be a nice ending, but well, last question. Say you run into a ferry. What would be your 3 wishes to accelerate clean tech innovation, Klaus?
As specific as possible. Thank you.
Yes, financing, we discussed that. I think that's number 1. Energy, I would fully agree. Number 2, and I wish that we could redo 2022, where we, for Germany at least, would use the nuclear power plants that we had for a couple of more years, and finally we discussed that young people, we need more young people, and I would like to ask the ferry to have more young people be enthusiastic about this topic.
Thank you, Johanna.
Yeah, I agree. I think one wish is that a topic that's less sexy, which is energy efficiency, energy saving, circular economy and recycling. That's something that always falls off the table, but we need to reduce demand if we want to get prices down. So my first wish is more focus on energy efficiency and reduced consumption, where that doesn't impact quality of life, GDP, etc. Second wish, more risk capital in Europe. I think we don't have the right funding landscape yet, and the US is still better as you pointed out. And third wish is that all of these great companies that we have, I think Germany is the perfect example of a lot of hidden champions that are not that well known on a global scale or on an advertisement scale, that they get better at promoting the commercial successes that they have, and that we get better in general at commercialization and selling what we do as what it is, which is often very great.
Toro, over to you.
Yeah, the fourth wish for me would be more positive energy, so that it's not only seen as a risk and from the negative side, that we see it really as a positive challenge, that we can shape the future, go into the future. We have the right technologies, we have the right people here in Europe to go in this direction, and I think this positiveness is really necessary. And if we see also currently the discussion in Germany, I lived 11 years abroad, and it's very difficult to see how things are tackled here, and that is my main wish, beside everything else what we have discussed. Of course, money is always fine and clear direction is also good, but this positive energy, I think that's important, and I think the ARC is here exactly the right place to spark this positive energy.
Thank you so much. Now, we actually had planned to do a session wrap-up, but my brilliant colleagues will write this and provide it to you afterwards. I think we touched upon a lot of very important points in these discussions. Thank you all three so much. Please, let's give them a warm applause for the great discussions and the questions.